All right, let's just get right into it, shall we? Welcome, everyone. Today, we are absolutely cutting through the noise and hype surrounding one of the most anticipated real estate events of the entire year, the Thomson Reserve mega launch. We're taking the rumors, pairing them with the raw data, and giving you a clear, objective breakdown of what's actually driving its value, the mechanics behind that massive price tag, and ultimately helping you figure out if it genuinely aligns with your long-term goals. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. We're going to start with a quick overview of Thomson Reserve, unpack that price tag, look at the prime location in schools, run everything through our MEAT investment framework, and then finish up with a final buyer verdict. This is structured specifically to get past the marketing fluff, so let's dive in.
Kicking things off with Section 1, an overview of Thomson Reserve.
Okay, let's dive into this because to really understand the sheer, unprecedented scale of what used to be the Thomson View and Block site, we have to look at this number. $810 million. That is a staggering land acquisition cost, translating to about $1,178 per square foot per plot ratio. A number that large requires serious firepower, and the site was scooped up by an absolute powerhouse consortium, UOL, Capital Land, and Singland. If those names ring a bell, it's because this is the exact same developer team that successfully pulled off recent mega launches like Ammo Residence and Pine Tree Dill. They definitely have a proven playbook for sites of this magnitude. So how does this actually play out on the calendar? Well, following that massive site acquisition, we are looking at a highly strategic preview launch window, expected right around September or October. You know how it goes? Developers traditionally wait for the Hungry Ghost Festival to wrap up before rolling out their blockbuster projects, and Thomson Reserve is definitely no exception here. Looking further down the line, we're projecting an estimated TOP, the temporary occupation permit, around the year 2031. So make no mistake, this is a long-term play. Physically, this translates to a land footprint equivalent to roughly 9 to 10 football fields. 9 to 10. That kind of sprawling space is incredibly rare in today's market. It allows for up to 1,200 residential units and gives the developers all the room they need for extensive facilities and landscaping. But honestly, the real crown jewel here isn't just the sheer size, it's the topography and the placement. This massive project sits on an elevated plot right at the doorstep of the Upper Thomson MRT station. Which brings us nicely to Section 2, unpacking the price tag. Because look, whenever you have a premium site paired with premium developers, the financial reality is always the biggest hurdle. Why is the projected per square foot price, the PSF, so high? Based on that land cost we just talked about, plus modern construction margins, market expectations are pointing toward an average launch price somewhere in the high $2,700 per square foot. And for the really premium units, think high floor stacks with completely unblocked views of the landed enclaves and greenery. We could easily see those prices touching or even crossing the $3,000 PSF mark. I know, on paper, to someone used to older condo pricing, that looks steep, but there is a very specific mechanical reason for this. And this brilliantly illustrates the impact of recent government regulations called harmonization rules. Let's demystify that jargon real quick. These are new rules that completely change how developers calculate the size of an apartment. Under these guidelines, the strata area, which is the square footage you actually buy, no longer includes non-livable spaces. So those massive aircon ledges, the empty void spaces over staircases, those oversized bay windows, poof, they are entirely gone from the calculation. The crucial contrast is this. The old way of buying meant you were paying a lower PSF, sure, but you were also buying a lot of wasted, non-livable square footage. You were essentially buying air, which is a pretty expensive hobby in real estate. The new way, the way that applies to Thomson Reserve, means the PSF number naturally has to go up, but you are paying strictly for highly efficient, usable indoor space. When you factor in these harmonization rules, the overall quantum, the total price of the unit, actually makes a lot more sense, because literally every square foot you buy is space you can actually live in. Moving on to Section 3, prime location and schools. Now that we've decoded the pricing mechanics, we can pivot to the value side of the equation. A premium price tag demands premium amenities, right? And Thomson Reserve ticks off nearly 80% of a typical homebuyer's ultimate checklist. First, you've got seamless connectivity. The Upper Thomson MRT and the Thomson East Coast Line is literally downstairs, shooting you straight into Orchard Road in about 20 minutes. Second is lifestyle. It sits directly across from the famous Upper Thomson Food and Cafe stretch, complete with supermarkets and enrichment centers. And third, nature. You have incredibly close proximity to Mac Ritchie Reservoir for weekend recreation. It's just a highly established ecosystem. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the educational network, because that is what truly drives underlying demand here. In Singapore real estate, proximity to elite primary schools is like a structural insurance policy for property value. For Thomson Reserve, selected blocks will fall safely within the crucial 1-kilometer radius for Aitong School. Furthermore, the project sits in really close proximity to Catholic High School, mirroring the exact kind of educational draw that made neighboring developments like Jadescape so fiercely popular. These schools practically guarantee a constant stream of future buyers wanting to move into the area.
Let's level up the analysis with Section 4, the MEAT investment framework.
So we've looked at the lifestyle, but how does this hold up as a long-term financial asset? Let's systematically break down our MEAT investment framework to evaluate this totally objectively. M is for master plan. Thomson is undergoing massive upgrades, most notably the North-South corridor opening from 2027. More importantly, the government is injecting 1,600 new BTO flats into the area, and that nearby SJI International site, it's going to be redeveloped for housing by 2030. That creates a massive, guaranteed pipeline of future HDB upgraders. E is for entry price. Yes, it's a premium launch, but developers face a strict 5-year ABSD tax deadline to sell all 1,200 units. That immense pressure forces them to price realistically to move volume. A is amenities, the MRT, and schools we just covered. And T is for transactions. We just have to look at neighboring mega developments like Jadescape and the Panorama, where initial buyers have a proven track record of locking in resale profits crossing the $1 million mark.
Now, a common question we get is how Thomson Reserve stacks up against the recent cluster of Lentor launches, and it really boils down to your own buyer persona. Thomson Reserve is the mature estate story. You're paying for immediacy. The elite schools are already there, the cafe enclave is thriving, the neighborhood is deeply established. Lentor, on the other hand, is the transformation story. It appeals to buyers who want to get in on the ground floor of a purely evolving ecosystem, usually at a slightly different entry price. You just have to decide which story fits your timeline.
And that brings us to Section 5, the final buyer verdict. We've analyzed the data, the pricing, the frameworks, but here is your sobering reality check. Real estate is only a good investment if you have holding power. Do not stretch your finances to the absolute maximum just to chase the newest, shiniest mega launch. It is paramount that you maintain healthy reserve funds. Shifting economic environments happen, interest rates fluctuate, and you need to ensure that your daily quality of life isn't compromised by heavy, unmanageable mortgage stress. Which leaves us with this final thought. Thomson Reserve is undeniably a powerhouse project with incredible fundamentals. But you really have to ask yourself, are you buying simply because you're getting swept up in the prevailing market hype? Or are you buying strictly for the lifestyle benefits, knowing with absolute clarity that your financial buffer comfortably supports this move? Take a hard look at your numbers, use the frameworks we discussed today, and make the decision that empowers your future. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.